for you, Alex, beginning now. Which British actress plays the character Rey in the Star Wars film trilogy, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker?
Oh, pass.
Oh, Daisy Ridley, great niece of Arnold Ridley of Dad's Army fame. In 2015, the boxer Floyd Mayweather Jr. defeated Manny Pacquiao and Andre Berto by unanimous decision in both fights. But his next fight, in 2017, was more controversial. Why so?
He won by knockout?
No, it was because it was against the mixed martial arts fighter Conor McGregor and was derided as a publicity stunt. Mayweather did win. Have a listen to this voice. I'll ask you about it afterwards.
To my mind, there is absolutely no difference between one type of food and another type of food as far as quality is concerned. When you eat a complicated dish, or even a reasonably simple one like a coq au vin, which after all is just a casserole type of dish, which has many ingredients, takes a lot of time to prepare. You taste it, you like it, you say it's good, and if you taste the cheese sandwich, after all, there are only 3 ingredients. It's got to be good bread, it's got to be good cheese, plenty of it, and butter. And if that is good, that is good.
That was the voice of the food critic Egon Ronay, who died in 2010. Do you know which country he was born in?
Russia?
It was Hungary, I'm afraid. In 2018, whose painting, Portrait of an Artist, Pool with 2 Figures, sold at auction for $90.3 million. It became the most expensive piece of art by a living artist sold at auction. Whose painting?
Lucian Freud?
David Hockney. The actor Eddie Redmayne won an Oscar for Best Actor in a Leading Role for his portrayal of a real-life figure in the 2014 film The Theory of Everything. Who did he play?
Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking, absolutely correct. Who was the UK's first Green Member of Parliament, elected for the first time in 2010?
Caroline Lucas.
Caroline Lucas, who won the seat of Brighton Pavilion. Which football manager, currently in charge of a Premier League club, left Barcelona in 2012 after winning 14 trophies during his 4-year tenure?
Is that Pep Guardiola?
Pep Guardiola, indeed, now at Manchester City. Finally, Alex, the Emmy-nominated Better Call Saul, which began in 2015, is the prequel to which hugely successful TV series?
Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad. Well done, Alex. You now have 8 points. So to recap, the scores so far are tied in second place, Louise and Alex with 8 points. Hitesh is in the lead with 12. That means that in order to decide the order of that round, I'll have to give you a tie-break question, a tie-break to Louise and Alex. I'm going to give you a list of things that happened in a particular decade. To keep things completely fair, it's not a decade we're covering elsewhere in the quiz. In other words, from before the 1960s. As soon as you think you know which decade it is, would you shout your name? And you'll get a chance to answer. And if you're wrong, I'll hand it over to your opponent. So if that's all clear, tell me, in which decade did the following things happen? The comedian Tommy Handley died. Harold Wilson became a cabinet minister. Alex, when do you think that was?
1960s?
It's not. He became Prime Minister then, I think. And Mervyn Peake published the first novel in his Gormenghast trilogy.
The 1940s.
The 1940s, Louise. Yes. You snatch it there at the very end, and so that means that you are in second place. And that means, generally then, we've established the order of the decade. You've each answered questions on your chosen decade, and we'll divide up the remaining decades now. Still on offer, the 60s, the 80s, and the 2000s. Hitesh, you're in the lead after the first round. You get first pick. What are you going for?
I'll have a bash at the 80s, please, Stuart.
The 80s? Louise, we've just established you're in second place. You get the next choice.
I'll go for the 1960s.
The 1960s. And that means, I'm afraid that, Alex, you've got Hobson's choice. You're going for the 2000s. The noughties, if you will. Well, I imagine that might be okay. So, Alex, you're in third place, so we begin with you and your questions on the noughties. Sarah Michelle Gellar played the title character in which TV series that came to an end in 2003?
Sex and the City?
Buffy the Vampire Slayer. In 2007, The Reading Room at the British Museum was redesigned to accommodate important exhibitions. Which hugely popular exhibition was the first to use the new space?
The Pharaohs.
It was the Terracotta Army of the first Emperor of China. Which film, released in 2000, was set against the backdrop of the 1984-85 miners' strike and starred Jamie Bell in the title role?
Billy Elliot.
Billy Elliot, later a successful musical, of course. Who was US Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013 in the administration of Barack Obama?
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Rodham Clinton, exactly right. Listen to this clip, Alex, from a news bulletin of 2008, and your question will come afterwards.
The award-winning screenwriter Abby Mann has died at the age of 80. He won an Academy Award in 1961 for Judgment at Nuremberg. Abby Mann also won several Emmys, including one in 1973 for a film which featured a police detective called the character on whom a long-running TV series was eventually based.
It's 10 minutes past 8. Now, clearly, the demise of the screenwriter Abby Mann wasn't meant to be the source of hilarity, but the newsreader's laughter had been triggered by the previous story, a clip of the recently discovered earliest recording of the human voice. Who was that newsreader?
Rita Chakrabarti.
Well, Radio 4 listeners will be shouting at the radio. Charlotte Green, much loved on this network, now, amongst other things, doing the football scores on 5 Live. At the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, Great Britain took the gold medal in the rowing coxless fours. Steve Redgrave was one of the crew of 4. Can you name 2 of the others for your 2 points?
Matthew Pinson, James Cracknell.
2 points there. Matthew Pinson, James Cracknell. You could have also had Tim Foster. In September 2007, which bank appealed to the Bank of England for emergency funding, causing panic and leading to the first run on a British bank in 150 years?
Was it Northern Rock?
It was indeed Northern Rock. And finally in this round, which rock band's recording of the Mike Darbo song Handbags and Glad Rags was used as the theme for the TV sitcom The Office, the original British version of which started in 2001?
Is it Stereophonics?
Absolutely right. It was indeed Stereophonics, Alex. 10 points for you on that second round. Your total score is now 18, which means it's now time for Louise, who we come to answer questions. And remind me what you have chosen, Louise.
The 60s.
The 1960s for Louise. What, Louise, is the more common name for the conflict sometimes referred to as the June War, the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, or the Third Arab-Israeli War?
The 6-Day War.
The 6-Day War, correct. In the 1964 film comedy Dr. Strangelove, Peter Sellers played multiple roles, including the deranged military scientist of the title. But the full title of the film has a further 11 words after his name. Do you know the full title?
How I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love the Bomb, or something like that.
Exactly, not something like that, something exactly like that.
Okay.
Dr. Strangelove, or How I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love the Bomb. Brilliant. Monica Douglas, a prefect, famous mostly for mathematics, which she could do in her brain, and Eunice Gardner, small, neat, and famous for her sprightly gymnastics and glamorous swimming, are 2 of the schoolgirl characters in which novel first published in 1961?
Is it St. Trinian's? Bells of St. Trinian's?
It's The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark. All her pupils, of course, were the creme de la creme.
Yes, of course.
At a Tudor farmhouse in West Sussex called Redlands, the police made a notorious drugs bust in February 1967, which led to the arrest of 2 members of a pop group, one of whom was the owner of the house. Which group?
The Rolling Stones.
The Rolling Stones. It was Keith Richards' house, yes. Here's a novelty spin-off song from a TV series. The question will come after you've heard it.
Everybody's going for those kinky boots, kinky boots.
Kinky boots, it's a manly kind of fashion that you borrowed from the brutes.
Borrowed from the brutes. Kinky boots, fashion magazine says wear 'em.
And you rush to obey like the women in a harem.
Full length, half length,
Fully fashioned calf length,
brown boots, black boots,
patent leather jet boots,
low boots, high boots.
lovely lanky thigh boots.
We all dig those boots. Everybody's crazy for those kinky boots, kinky boots, kinky boots.
And whether you're in evening dress or bathing suit,
You wear boots, boots, a kinky boots.
You heard Patrick McNee and the late Honor Blackman there, the stars of the early 60s incarnation of the Avengers. Can you give me the names of both of their characters in that show?
Kathy Gale and Steed.
John Steed and Kathy Gale, I think we can let you have that. The song was recorded in 1964. Not a hit, though, till 1990, when it was given new impetus by Simon Mayo, playing it repeatedly on wonderful Radio 1. The new Coventry Cathedral was consecrated in 1962 and was notable for its use of work by modern artists on sacred subjects, whose sculpture of the Archangel Michael's victory over the devil dominates the cathedral entrance.
Was it Basil Spence?
It was Sir Jacob Epstein, I'm afraid.
Oh.
Can you complete this quotation? I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the colour of their skin, but by
The strength of their character.
the content of their character. Technically, the content of their character. I think I'll give you 1 point for that, from Martin Luther
Thank
King's
you.
famous speech of the 28th of August, 1963. At the time of his marriage to Princess Margaret, the photographer who was given the title Earl of Snowdon in 1961 was known by what name?
Anthony Armstrong-Jones.
Anthony Armstrong-Jones is exactly right. That means, Louise, with 11 points in that round, you've bumped up your total to 19. Well done.
Well, thank you.
Well done indeed. So, we now move on to Hitesh, who was leader at the halfway stage, and the score you're aiming to beat is 19 from Louise. How confident are you, Hitesh?
Not very.
Oh, okay.
We'll see how it goes.
Well, let's see indeed with your questions on the 1980s. In 1984, a fire at a famous British landmark was seen by some as divine retribution for the ordination of the Bishop of Durham, Dr. David Jenkins, who'd expressed some views that were at odds with those of many practicing Christians. What was the landmark?
St Paul's Cathedral?
It was York Minster. A Nintendo character called Jumpman first appeared in 1981 in the arcade game Donkey Kong. He later became known around the world by what other name?
Super Mario.
Mario, absolutely. Which Beijing square was the scene of major democracy protests against the Chinese government in 1989?
Tiananmen Square.
Tiananmen Square, indeed. 1983 saw the release of the first Now That's What I Call Music album, which featured 30 of the year's biggest hits and spawned a series that's lasted for 4 decades and is now well beyond its 100th volume. This was one of the songs on that first compilation. Who's the singer? Who was that, Hitesh?
No idea. Howard Jones?
Well, for someone who's no idea, you've got it bang on. It was indeed,
Oh, wow.
It was indeed a new song by Howard Jones. He used to be accompanied by a dancer on Top of the Pops, who indeed seemed to be trying to throw off his mental chains, as mentioned in the song. Referencing Paul Revere's ride at the beginning of the American War of Independence, which film prompted its screenwriter, Colin Welland, to declare, "The British are coming," whilst accepting an Oscar?
Revolution?
Chariots of Fire from 1981, which 96-mile-long structure was gradually dismantled from November 1989, 28 years after it had been created.
The Berlin Wall.
The Berlin Wall, indeed. In a classic sporting moment from the 1980s, Can you tell me which British athlete took the gold medal in the 1500 metres at the 1980 Moscow Olympics?
Seb Coe?
Sebastian Lord Coe. It was expected that Steve Ovett would win, but he ended up taking the bronze. Finally, in this round, Hitesh, what was the name of the volcano which erupted in Washington State in the northwestern United States in 1980, causing an estimated $1 billion worth of damage?
I have no idea. Mount Rainier.
This time, no Howard Jones style, no idea, correct answer. It was called Mount St. Helens.
Okay.
Mount St. Helens. But well done, Hitesh. With a score of 10 points in that round, you've now increased your total to 22. So to recap, third today with 18 points is Alex. Runner-up with 19 points is Louise. Today's My Generation winner then with 22 points is Hitesh. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Well done, Hitesh.
There were some tough questions in there, I thought.
Can I just say I'm very impressed with how well Alex did. I think the younger generation,
yes.
The general knowledge is sadly lacking in a lot of younger people, but I'm very impressed by Alex.
That's very kind.
I concur with that. I absolutely concur with that, Alex. Well done, yes. So,
Thank you. You'll have to have me back on Monday.
We will. When we transfer to TV and there's £1 million at stake, we'll have the three of you back on straight away, yeah.
Okay.
And we can't let you go without offering something from our conveyor belt of generous prizes. Let's see what's coming along. Hitesh, you take with you today a pair of promotional St. Winifred's School Choir Dealy Boppers. Very well done. Thank you all three of you for taking part. I hope, as I say, it's been fun. Good of you to expose yourself to questions on other people's generations as well as your own. 3 more contestants will be generating general knowledge next time. I hope you'll be able to listen. Thanks for joining us today. Stay safe and goodbye.
My Generation is presented by Stuart McConey and produced in Salford by Paul Bajoria. Next week's edition is the last in the current run, but if you've missed any of the series so far, you might like to know that the programmes are available to stream or download via BBC Sounds for a month after broadcast.
BBC Radio 4 6:30 Comedies.
This is already the longest conversation I've ever had about Brussels sprouts.
Panel shows.
Not even the best.
Vegan meeting. This is what we do.
Topical satire.
Welcome to Peston with me, a variable speed limit in human form.
And sitcoms.
You're sending me on a course. It's called Assertiveness in the Workplace. I really don't want to go, but they said I had to.
Comedy at 6:30. Weeknights on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
This is BBC Radio 4. Now, Poetry Please, with a guest poet, Roger Robinson.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to a new series of Poetry Please. I'm Maya Bosworth. I'm one of the producers here in the Radio 4 Poetry team. And all this series, while Roger McGough has been at home for lockdown, we've been asking some of our favourite poets to help us go through your requests and to share with us some of the poems they love. Today's guest is the incredible Roger Robinson, who I think must be one of the most admired people in the British poetry scene today. He's a wearer of many hats. He's a dub poet, a writer, an educator, and a musician, and he was the winner of this year's T.S. Eliot Prize for Poetry. This week's episode was recorded from his home during lockdown.
Hi, Roger.
Yo.
Here he is talking to producer Becky Ripley.
How are you doing?
I'm alright, man. I'm alright. You know, it's like it's an experience that you hopefully never have again. But it's I cannot slow it down. So we find ourselves in the middle of a pandemic. And one of the things I keep thinking is, what is the role of poems now? I think poems are important in this time. Poems help us with empathy for the people who are sick and suffering, for the people who don't have access, who are being ignored. For the isolated, poems can be friends. It can allow us to see what other people are thinking and see how other people practice vulnerability. But it's okay, because this too will end at some point. Then poems can help us make sense of what happened, allow new seeds to flourish, allow us to think about how we will live our lives from this point on. Many of the poems I've chosen are trying to speak to the time that we're in, as is the first poem I'm going to read, which is for the NHS. This poem is called Grace. It's about a nurse who helped me when my child was struggling to live in hospital, being badly premature. Grace. That year, we danced to the green bleeps on screens. My son had come early, just the 1 kilogram of him, all big head, bulging eyes and blue veins. On the ward I met Grace, a Jamaican senior nurse who sang pop songs on her shift like they were hymns. Your son feisty. He just pulling off all the breathing mask them. People spoke of her in half tones down these carbolic halls. Even the doctors gave way to her when it comes to putting a line into my son's nylon thread of a vein. She'd warned junior doctors with trembling hands, "May only letting you try twice." On her night shift, she pulls my son's incubator into her room no matter the tangled confusion of wires and machine. When the consultant told my wife and I on morning rounds that he's not sure my son will live, and if he lives, he might never leave the hospital, she pulled us quickly aside. Him have no right to say that just raw so. Another consultant tells the nurses to stop feeding a baby who will soon die, and she commands her loyal nurses to feed him. No baby must dead with a hungry belly. And she'd sit in the dark, rocking that well-fed baby held to her bosom, slowly humming the melody of Happy by Pharrell. And I think, if by some chance I'm not here and my son's light should flicker, then Grace, she should be the one.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break.
Hold on. Like, I know my son just come in the house, just like banging everything. Nico!
Well, it's nice to know that Nico's well after hearing Grace.
Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth.
The next poem I want to introduce is by a young writer called Caleb Femi. This poem is called Fam. One of the things I like about Caleb Femi is that he writes specifically about Black Britain, Peckham in particular, which is something I haven't seen in high literature. He's on Penguin Books, which is amazing for me. I love seeing young black writers on good publishers. So what's interesting about him is that he is using the evolving language of Black Britain and Black and urban Britain, black and white, and weaving it into tapestries of poems. That way he's pushing the language forward a lot more. But he's also doing it in a way that has some kind of cultural translation. It doesn't mean that a small subgroup would understand what's said. It means that many people could understand and empathize with the lives he talks about. This is a recording of Fam performed by Caleb Femi himself as a part of the BBC's Contain Strong Language Festival. Enjoy.
When we say fam, we don't mean what we have in common with blood. We mean you are the mirror that shows forth my better side. We mean you are the brother I chose and a sister I keep. We mean you and I have matching scars, so let's swap stories. We mean we won't break so easily next time. We mean telepathy. We mean we're still here even when we're not. We mean I know it hurts, let me carry some of your pain. We mean come round mine, there'll be food. We mean I got you. Every day I got you. We mean a call and response in casting protection spells. We mean teasing out miracles from concrete. We mean a smoke signal when you are lost inside your own ribcage. We mean the biggest inside joke on the ends. We mean we have to laugh. Crying doesn't stop it from happening. We mean don't ask how we're cousins. We mean God, command the ground to spew back up the body. We mean famine against Babylon. We mean fam.
That was Caleb Femi reading from his own poem Fam, and I am Roger Robinson, your guest poet for today, bringing you some of my favorite poems talking to the times. Now on to our next choice. It's a poem by Fiona Benson called Eurofighter Typhoon. In this poem, the instincts of a mother plays out the need to protect a child. What does the plane represent in this poem? What is she trying to hide? Like the mothers in this poem, I see it as my job as a parent to create happy memories for my son to remember, to protect him. Fiona Benson.
Eurofighter Typhoon. My daughters are playing outside with plastic hoops. The elder is trying to hula over and over. It falls off her hips, but she keeps trying. And the younger is watching and giggling, and they're happy in the bright afternoon. I'm indoors at the hob with the door open, so I can see them, because the elder might trip, and the younger is still a baby and liable to eat dirt. When out of clear skies, a jet comes in low over the village. At the first muted roar, the elder runs in squealing, then stops in the kitchen, her eyes adjusting to the dimness, looking foolish and unsure. I drop the spoon and bag of peas and leave her frightened and tittering, wiping my hands on my jeans, trying to walk and not run because I don't want to scare the baby who's still sat on the patio alone, looking for her sister, bewildered, trying to figure why she's gone. All this in the odd, dead pause of the lag. Then sound catches up with the plane, and now it's grey bellies right over our house with a metallic, grinding scream like the sky's being chainsawed open. And the baby's face drops to a square of pure fear. She tips forward and flattens her body on the ground and presses her face into the concrete slab. I scoop her up, and she presses in, shuddering, screaming her strange help pain cry. And it's all right now, I tell her again and again. But it's never all right now. Christ have mercy, my daughter in my arms can't steady me. Always some woman is running to catch up her children. We dig them out of the rubble in parts like plastered dolls. Mary, Mother of God, have mercy. Mercy on us all.
That was Fiona Benson reading her poem Eurofighter Typhoon, chosen by me, your guest poet Roger Robinson, with thanks to Lorna Westwood, Lydia McPherson and Katrina Naomi, who also requested that one. The next poem I want to introduce is called My Mother's Blues by Malika Booker. It gives a very different angle of motherhood. A motherhood that is straight ahead, even sometimes a bit harsh. Sometimes we wonder, what is the lesson that we can get from the harshness of our parents? My Mother's Blues by Malika Booker. I've seen her read this poem many times to the delight of audiences, so I'm going to try my best for her. I know she'll be listening. My mother knows pain, a sorrowful gospel type of pain, a slowly losing her eyesight, eye drops every night pain, a headache worrying for her children overseas, praying for their safety pain, a stare through each night, eyes blackening, hope they are all right pain. Yes, my mother knows pain. My children don't call, do they still love me pain? Will my daughter ever have children? She is 38 now. Pain. Your womb is becoming stone sermon for her only girl on her birthday. Pain. Yes, my mother knows pain. What did I do wrong bringing them up? Pain. My son has gone astray. Someone put obia on him, so I have to pray real hard. Pain. Look how so-and-so children do so well. I wish mine were like that. Pain. Yes, my mother knows pain. It's the house now empty, no one to cook for. Pain. And I can't let go, have to let go. Pain. It's a let me tell you how to bury me. Pain. I want a plain box, no fancy coffin, or I will come back and haunt you. Pain. I don't have no big set of people coming around calling it a wake. Pain. It's a let me tell you who will get what after I'm gone, so you don't fight. Pain. It's a don't worry, I will soon be dead and gone, and then you will miss me. Pain. Yes, my mother feels pain. The next poem is by an English-Ugandan poet called Nick Makoha. This poem is called Stone, and I really like the control of time across the poem. The fact that it's political but not preachy. And this is another poem where the mother is at the center, but this time it's about the mother's sacrifice to make a better future for her generations. I also like the reference to the biblical idea of stone and rolling away the stone. Nick Makoha.
Hi, my name is Nick Makoha. I'm going to read you my poem Stone. I wrote it to explain my gratitude to my mother for saving my life. Realizing that her sacrifices are pretty much what set into motion me becoming probably a poet, a writer, and a person who could live in the free world. I come from Uganda, a place that was ruled by the dictator Idi Amin, and I realized that if it wasn't for my mother's sacrifices, I probably wouldn't be here. Stone. The best thing I did was move my body from one side of the world to another. This required a visa, which required a bribe. The bribe placed in the palm of a man with a gun. Took my mother's monthly wage packet. The man with a gun let you speak to a clerk. He too wanted his wage, because it would be his job to have words with the judge for another month's salary. The official wanted his bribe, so listened to the clerk, escorted by the soldier, as he held his gun. As I sat with my mother at the steps of the court, drinking soda, waiting for one man to say yes, my mother said, in Uganda, a bribe stops men from doing nothing. It rolls away the stone. Her sips were slower than mine, each separated by this prayer.
That was Stone by Nick Makoha. Before that was My Mother's Blues by Malika Booker. Big thank you, Ruth Williams and Sarala Estruck, for requesting those poems. I'm going to move on to my next choice, which is by a personal favorite of mine called Linton Kwesi Johnson. Without him, I would not be around, and I won't be doing this radio show, and I would not be a poet. He's the one example of being a total poet, committed to craft, but also committed to change, which is something I really like in poets. This poem, Dread Beaten Blood, occurs in his books, but it also occurs on an album. It talks a lot about how migrants were treated. It talks a lot about the kind of racism that they face, the everyday death and casual ignoring of the suffering of black people in Britain of the 70s, which he documented in infinite detail. It's really interesting to see the significant cultural detail he puts in this poem, even into how the music moves according to what he's talking about. The form reflects the content. Linton Kwesi Johnson, Dread Beaten Blood.
Brothers and sisters rocking, a dread beat pulsing, fire burning, chocolate power and darkness creeping, night Black veil's night is weeping, electric lights consoling. Night, a small hall soaked in smoke, a house of ganja mist. Music blazing, sounding, thumping, fire, blood. Brothers and sisters rocking, stopping, rocking. Music breaking out, bleeding out, pumping out, fire, burning. Electric power of the red bulb, staying in the brain with the blood flow, and the bad thing is brewing. Ganja crawling, creeping to the brain, both like hurting, breaking, hurting, fire in the head and a dread beat, bleeding, beating, fire, dread. Rocks rolling over, heart sleeping while rage riding out of the heat and the hurt. And the fist curling anger reaches a her. Then flash of a blade from another to a hill, leap out for a dig of a flesh of a piece of skin. And blood, bitterness, exploding fire, wailing blood and bleeding.
That was poet and musician Linton Kwesi Johnson with his track Dread Beat and Blood, which I just love. Thanks to Michelle Insibo for requesting that one. Next poem I'm choosing is America by Claude McKay. Claude McKay was an immigrant, and then he was part of the Harlem Renaissance, but he was an immigrant from the Caribbean who became resonant within another social movement and created a lot of change with the Harlem Renaissance. And I feel like lots of kind of parallels with that. Myself coming from Trinidad and getting involved in the whole social movement of the lives of black British people. Now, this was written in 1921, but it still holds relevance. Claude McKay, America. Although she feeds me bread of bitterness and sinks into my throat her tiger's tooth, stealing my breath of life, I will confess I love this cultured hell that tests my youth. Her vigor flows like tides into my blood, giving me strength erect against her hate. Her bigness sweeps my being like a flood, yet as a rebel fronts a king in state, I stand within her walls with not a shred of terror, malice, not a word of jeer. Darkly I gaze into the days ahead, and see her might and granite wonders there, beneath the touch of time's unerring hand, like priceless treasures sinking in the sand. That was America by Claude McKay. It was requested by Anne Woolley. Thanks for that. And now on to an old favorite of mine, but not just of mine, but all the listeners through the years on Poetry Please, a much requested poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. One thing about the pandemic is the way it made me slow down. And I could perceive all the danger outside, but inside, I'm becoming more still. I found myself trying to go at a pace that was the pace outside. But within the constrictions of four walls of a house, it's impossible to go at that pace. Eventually, the house begins to decide your pace. Suddenly, the dusty LPs that I had were beckoning for me to read the inner sleeves. My son was beckoning me into his bedroom to tell me about the 800 characters of Pokemon. My wife and I, we sat, talked about permaculture and other self-sufficient things. And I found myself slowing down to the things that are most important. I like how this poem becomes relevant in different times of life. Here's a performed reading of Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost, read by Peter Marinka.
Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here, to watch his woods fill up with snow? My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep.
That was actor Peter Marinka reading Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. My next choice is by a poet I particularly admire. Very, very good poet called Caroline Bird. She has a new book out called The Air Year. This is Caroline Bird reading from The Air Year a poem called Mid-Air.
At the moment, one of the worst things about this feeling we're all having is the sense of waiting and suspension, and this is a poem about that moment just before a kiss and what would happen if you just got trapped in that moment forever. It's called Mid-Air. There is a corner of the city where the air is soft resin. Step in and it hardens around you, suspended in amber. We made the mistake of kissing there. Here. Our mouths midway across the same inhalation, like robbers mid-leap between rooftops. If kisses were scored by composers, they'd place the breath on the upbeat. Oh, God. Music preceded by mid-air. When the baton lifts, the orchestra tightens, and before the 1, 2, 3, and the sunlight is meticulous, and the river holds its tongue, and your silver earring steals like an aerialist's hoop, caught mid-spin, a note almost sung, locked in the amber of the and. We just want to land, or be landed on.
That was Mid-Air, written and read by Caroline Bird. I have been your guest poet, Roger Robinson, and I'd like to leave you with one more poem, a parting gift, if you will. This poem by Czesław Miłosz is so simple that it approaches purity. I chose this poem particularly because of the times that we are in. We have to really look at ourselves and say, what now? And how will we go forward? And what will we think of our past? And what will we do for our future? Before I go, I just want to thank everybody out there listening. Poetry is about connection. Poetry is not about separation. It's not about putting things away. It's to share. And perhaps we can use that spirit to try and share at least a listening ear to people who are suffering more than us at this time. Let's try and reach out. I'm Roger Robinson. I've been your guest poet. Thanks to everybody in Poetry Please for having me here, and I hope you enjoy this poem. This is Gift by Czesław Miłosz. A day so happy, fog lifted early. I worked in the garden. Hummingbirds were stopping over honeysuckle flowers. There was nothing on earth I wanted to possess. I knew no one worth my envying him. Whatever evil I had suffered, I forgot. To think that once I was the same man did not embarrass me. In my body I felt no pain. When straightening up, I saw the blue sea and sails.
That was Gift by Czesław Miłosz. and it was the final poem chosen today by our guest poet, Roger Robinson. Keep sending in your requests for poems you'd like to hear in the programme. We love getting your recommendations. You can write to us at Poetry Please, BBC Bristol, BS8 2LR. You can email us at poetry.please@bbc.co.uk, or you can tweet at BBC Poetry Please. Next week we'll be joined by the award-winning performance poet and playwright Sabrina Mahfouz. She'll be sifting through your requests and sharing some of her own favourite poems. Until then, goodbye.
Poetry Please was presented by Roger Robinson and produced in Bristol by Becky Ripley. And I'll just give you that email address again. It's poetry.please@bbc.co.uk. After the midnight news, how did reality TV turn surveillance into entertainment? That's in Watching Us in 15 minutes.
BBC News at midnight. This is Jane Steele. A number of people have been stabbed in a park in the centre of Reading. There are reports of fatalities. Details have emerged of some of the regulations that restaurants and pubs will need to follow when they reopen after the coronavirus lockdown. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, says an announcement will be made next week about the 2-metre social distancing rule in England. British travellers will be able to go to Spain from tomorrow without having to enter quarantine. In sport, there's been a full day of Premier League action for the first time since March. At least 3 people are reported to have been killed in a stabbing in a park in Berkshire. Police are examining the possibility that the incident in Reading was terrorism-related. Armed officers from Thames Valley Police later raided a flat elsewhere in the town centre, evacuating homes nearby. They said there was no suggestion the stabbings were linked to a Black Lives Matter protest which took place in the park around 2 hours before the attack happened. Our correspondent Helena Wilkinson reports from the scene.
Dozens of officers are manning a massive cordon around Forbury Gardens, the park where the stabbing took place in broad daylight. Police got called at around 7 this evening. 2 air ambulances were seen, as well as other emergency services. Lawrence Wart saw what happened. He says a man started attacking a big group of people.
There was a group of about 8 to 10 people, I think, middle-aged men drinking in a circle. And suddenly this one lone man started off the path to the left towards them, stabbed one just once, went around to the next person, stabbed them, went around to the next person, and managed to get 3 of them before anyone sort of realised.
Sources say at least 3 people have died in the incident. Those injured have been taken to hospital. A man was arrested at the scene. Security sources have told the BBC he's thought to be Libyan. The Prime Minister said his thoughts are with all those affected by what he described as an appalling incident.
Draft guidelines have been drawn up setting out how pubs, cafes and restaurants can operate safely when they reopen after an easing of the coronavirus lockdown, possibly in 2 weeks' time in England. Underpinning the advice is the need to minimise close contact among staff and customers. People will be encouraged to order food and drink on smartphone apps, and customer numbers would be restricted. The guidance has been compiled by a government task force which included representatives of the hospitality industry. Here's our business correspondent, Katie Prescott.
As pubs and restaurants look to reopen, the big question is how will they be able to do that safely? And what will the experience be like for customers? Draft guidelines suggest that reopening could mean using screens or barriers to separate people, managing the flow of customers through the venue, providing cutlery only when food is served, and using disposable condiments. For staff to keep contact to a minimum, they'll be encouraged to use radios or telephones to send orders from service areas to kitchens. Workers will be deployed in fixed teams, and bar service will be discouraged in favour of table service. For the industry, though, the key issue is whether the social distancing rule of 2 metres will be maintained. Kate Nichols at UK Hospitality, which represents the industry, says it will mean the difference between businesses being able to keep going or closing their doors.
It stays at 2 metres because of the nature of the premises. About a quarter of our pubs, restaurants can't reopen. Almost all of our hotels can. But what we do know is that the difference between viability and not being able to survive, it is as stark as that. At 2 metres, those businesses will be operating at just 30% of their normal revenues, well below break even, and we will see jobs considerably lost.
The other concern for the industry is whether customers will feel comfortable enough to come back, to eat and drink in bars and restaurants, even with these protective measures, and whether the cost of implementing them will prove too much for some.
The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, has indicated that the government is poised to relax the 2-metre rule in England. He said the result of a review would be announced in the coming week. Our political correspondent Helen Catt reports.
Pressure has been growing on the government to reduce the 2-metre requirement for social distancing, not only from the hospitality industry, but also from its own backbenches. Conservative MPs who are concerned by the economic and social impact of lockdown have been pressing for it to change. Boris Johnson has previously indicated he would like to shorten the distance when the infection rate decreases. It's widely expected, although it can't be said for certain, that a review due to conclude next week will pave the way for just such a reduction. An expectation that the Chancellor Rishi Sunak appeared to back on a visit to shops in Northallerton this morning.
The outcome of that review will be announced this week. Obviously, that's something that will make an enormous difference, I think, to many businesses who are keen to see a change. Obviously, we need to go through that review, but I'm very understanding of the calls for action on that, particularly for the hospitality industry, for our pubs, for our restaurants.
Relaxing the 2-metre rule in England would mark a significant shift for the government. Previous measures to begin easing lockdown restrictions, such as partially reopening schools, have been criticised by some of its own scientific advisers as coming too early. Among the critics was Professor Callum Semple from the University of Liverpool, but he says his view has now changed.
In my opinion, it's now a reasonable political decision to relax these rules, perhaps accelerate school opening and start opening up other parts of the economy where it becomes harder to maintain the 2-metre rule and where you might envisage going down to 1 metre with various caveats and other precautions. But it's only possible because we've got low levels of transmission and far fewer numbers of cases.
Ultimately, it will be up to the politicians in Westminster to weigh up a range of factors in deciding whether or not to reduce the distance in England, and for the devolved administrations in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales in deciding whether or not to follow suit.
Another 128 people who tested positive for coronavirus have died across the UK. That takes the overall number of fatalities to 42,589. Spain has agreed to let British citizens travel to the country from tomorrow without the need to self-isolate for 2 weeks because of the coronavirus pandemic. The same won't yet apply to Spanish visitors to the UK, as Guy Hedgecoe reports from Madrid.
Spain warned some days ago that although it planned to lift travel restrictions for European visitors, it might continue to make British tourists undergo a 2-week quarantine unless the UK eased its own controls for Spaniards. But the Spanish Foreign Minister, Arantxa González, has said that visitors from the UK will now no longer need to self-isolate. Like other Europeans, they will instead have to undergo a temperature test on arrival at Spanish airports. Ms González said that no reciprocal deal had been reached with the British government, which is scheduled to review its own rules regarding self-isolation for foreign visitors on June the 29th.
We nevertheless are doing this out of respect for the 400,000 British citizens that have a second residency in Spain and that are dying to benefit from their homes in our country.
With more than 28,000 deaths caused by coronavirus, Spain has been one of the countries in Europe which has been hardest hit by the pandemic. But the authorities now believe it is firmly under control. Tomorrow, Spaniards will be able to move freely around their country for the first time in more than 3 months, as a national state of emergency, which has been used to supervise the lockdown, is lifted.
President Trump has sacked a federal prosecutor who had refused to step down from his post. Jeffrey Berman has overseen the prosecution of a number of Mr. Trump's associates since he took office in New York in 2018. Here's David Willis.
Geoffrey Berman has been behind a number of high-profile investigations of President Trump and his campaign, among them the criminal prosecution of Mr. Trump's former lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, and was currently thought to be investigating the activities of Rudy Giuliani, who has also been providing legal services to the president. Reports here suggest Mr. Trump had been seeking to remove Mr. Berman for some time, and on Friday night the Attorney General William Barr announced in a press release that Mr. Berman was stepping down. Shortly afterwards, however, Mr. Berman issued a statement of his own, saying not only that he hadn't resigned, but that he had no intention of leaving. As if to reinforce the point, Mr. Berman turned up for work today, prompting William Barr to write to him, saying that he had asked President Trump to remove him with immediate effect, and Mr. Trump had agreed to do so. Mr. Berman has since issued a statement praising his successor, Audrey Strauss. Adding to the confusion, President Trump told reporters he wasn't involved in Geoffrey Berman's sacking and that the decision rested with the Attorney General.
A federal court in the United States has rejected President Trump's attempt to block the publication of a book by one of his former advisers. Mr. Trump has accused John Bolton of revealing classified information. The president will tonight hold his first rally for supporters since the beginning of March. Here's our North America correspondent, Peter Bowes.
In The Room Where It Happened, a White House memoir, John Bolton paints a withering picture of Donald Trump. The U.S. District Judge Royce Lamberth agreed with the U.S. government that Mr. Bolton's conduct raised grave national security concerns, but he said an injunction was not the appropriate remedy. With hundreds of thousands of copies around the globe, many in newsrooms, the damage, he said, is done. Mr. Trump said his former national security advisor must pay a very big price.
I think the judge was very smart and very indignant at what Bolton did. I think it was a great ruling. Obviously, the book was already out and leaked and everything else, but he leaked classified information, so he's got a big problem.
The president is about to address his first campaign rally since the coronavirus pandemic took hold. Health officials in Tulsa have strongly advised against the event taking place in a city where earlier this week the number of cases of coronavirus hit a new high. There's concern that it could lead to new outbreaks of the disease. Tickets were issued with a requirement that attendees absolve the president's campaign of any liability should they fall sick with COVID-19. A spokesman for the Trump campaign said quarantine procedures were immediately implemented when 6 members of the team working in Tulsa tested positive for the virus. Tim Murta added that neither the staff members affected nor anyone in immediate contact with them will be at the rally or near attendees.
Anti-racism protesters have held another weekend of demonstrations in London and other cities around the UK. Hundreds marched from Hyde Park to Parliament Square in support of the Black Lives Matter campaign. In Glasgow, hundreds of people attended an anti-racism rally in the city centre, despite appeals that they stay away. 3 children have died in hospital after a fire at a flat in Paisley in Renfrewshire. They were aged between 5 and 12. Their 39-year-old mother is in a critical condition. In sport, there have been 4 games in the Premier League and a record-breaking win at Ascot. With all the details, here's Shabnam Yunus-Jewel.
Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta says his side threw away 3 points after losing in stoppage time at relegation-threatened Brighton. Arteta's team had led 1-0 only to concede twice in the last 15 minutes and lose 2-1. Neil Maupay got the winner, much to the frustration of the Arsenal players, who felt he was at fault for a serious-looking injury to goalkeeper Bernard Leno.
Just went for the ball. I mean, I'm that type of player. I just don't stop until the referee blew the whistle. I never meant to injure him, so I'm sorry for him. I already apologized at halftime to their staff and their manager, and I hope it's going to be a speedy recovery for him.
Wolves are just 2 points off a Champions League place after beating West Ham 2-0. Bournemouth remain in the bottom 3 after losing 2-0 at home to Crystal Palace. Watford and Leicester exchanged late goals in a 1-1 draw. The return of the Premier League continues today with 3 games, including the Merseyside derby. Liverpool will move within 1 victory of the title if they win at Everton. A point at Cardiff will see Leeds return to the top of the Championship later. West Brom moved above them on Saturday with a goalless draw at home to Birmingham. Frankie Dettori says it's special to equal one of his heroes, Pat Edry's record of 73 Royal Ascot winners after landing a treble on day 5 and being named leading rider. Meanwhile, Nando Parrado became Ascot's biggest priced winner at 150 to 1. He was ridden to victory by Adam Kirby.
Listen, it's a great race to win, and we've knocked out the door in it for many years, but listen, full credit again to Clive, and again to the little horse. He's very, very tough, you know. He hung in there for me, and the race we got going quite early, so he had to be brave for me, but to be fair, he hung in there, and fair play to him. He's got the horse.
And Scotland's Stephen Maguire made 6 centuries on his way to beating Australian Neil Robertson, 9 frames to 5 to reach the semi-finals of snooker's Tour Championship. The top 8 players of the season are competing in Milton Keynes.
Now, a look at the front pages of the Sunday papers, and a number of them report that Boris Johnson is preparing to announce a further easing of the lockdown on Tuesday, designed, as the Sunday Telegraph puts it, to unlock swathes of the economy. According to the paper, he's poised to introduce a new 1 metre plus rule for all venues, including shops, restaurants, schools, offices, factories and parks, to take effect from the 4th of July. The paper understands it would allow people to remain a metre away from others if they take additional measures to protect themselves, such as wearing a mask. The Mail on Sunday reports that the Prime Minister will also announce the reopening of hotels, holiday parks and hairdressers at the same time. For its lead, the Sunday Times says the BBC is expected to grant a second reprieve to pensioners aged 75 or over by delaying the scrapping of free TV licences for another 2 months beyond August. The headlines again. At least 3 people are reported to have been killed in a stabbing at a park in Reading. Police are said to be investigating whether it was terror-related. Draft guidelines have been drawn up setting out how pubs, cafes and restaurants can reopen safely after the lockdown. From tomorrow, British tourists can travel to Spain without having to quarantine when they arrive. President Trump has sacked a prosecutor who investigated Mr. Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, and his advisor, Rudy Giuliani. BBC News.
And the news was read by Jane Steele. Our series about the rise of reality TV continues in a couple of minutes, but first let's take a look at the weather. And an area of low pressure to the northwest of the United Kingdom is sending another spell of rain across all parts, although the rain won't reach much of northeast Scotland and the far southeast of England until after dawn. It'll be windy with southerly winds gusting 30 to 40 miles an hour and perhaps a little higher at times towards Irish Sea coasts. Overnight temperatures will fall into the range of 11 to 14 degrees Celsius. During Sunday morning, what's left of the overnight rain will clear to leave a dry day of sunny spells and scattered showers, some of which will be heavy and possibly thundery. Now, here's the detail for Sunday, starting in Scotland, where it'll be a wet start across much of the country. The rain will clear northwards from the north of the mainland by early afternoon and then move across the Northern Isles as the afternoon goes on. Behind the rain, it'll brighten up with sunny spells, but there'll be some heavy showers too, with the risk of thunder and lightning. In Northern Ireland, the overnight rain will have already cleared by morning to leave a bright start, but cloud will build again and there will be some heavy and possibly thundery downpours moving through before it turns drier and sunnier again by the evening. For Wales, northwest England and southwest England, any early rain will soon clear to leave a day of sunny spells and scattered heavy showers. By the evening, most places will be dry with sunny end to the day. And in the Midlands and the eastern side of England, any early rain will clear easternmost counties by the end of the morning. Following the rain, there will be sunny spells and scattered showers. There's a greater chance of catching a shower compared with Saturday, though not everyone will see one. Temperatures on Sunday will be mainly in the range of 16 to 19 degrees, with just the eastern areas of England seeing highs into the low 20 Celsius. It'll be a windy day with southwesterly winds, by the way, gusting up to about 40 miles an hour. And in the week ahead, Scotland and Northern Ireland will stay close to the stalled weather front, giving some cloud and occasional spells of rain. England and Wales will be near a high pressure, so here it'll be mainly dry from midweek, and it'll turn very warm to hot, with temperatures in the hotter spots reaching into the low 30s. And that's our look at the weather. This is BBC Radio 4. Now, the TV show Big Brother is 20 years old this year, and the technology writer Jamie Bartlett explains how the programme changed history.
Week 2 of Watching Us, and Jamie's pondering House of Villains became entertainment.
In April 2005, a man in his 20s called Javid Karim was filmed for 15 seconds standing in front of an elephant at the zoo in San Diego. He then uploaded that video to a fledgling website he'd just finished building.
Alright, so here we are, one of the elephants. The cool thing about these guys is that they have really long trunks, and that's cool.
He called the video Me at the Zoo. It was the first video ever uploaded onto YouTube. Did you ever wonder how we came to live in a world where 100 million people would watch a video of a stranger describing an elephant? It all started with a television show called Big Brother. Big Brother was a huge ratings hit. Plus, it was cheap to make at the very moment when cable and satellite meant there was more airtime to fill.
100 contestants who dream of becoming a professional chef.
I'd love to change my life. Hello and welcome to Pop Idol, the show that's on a mission to find the nation's next musical megastar.
This is a job interview from hell. First prize, you get to work for me.
By 2003, reality TV had proliferated into 1,000 forms. Survival shows, singing competitions, romance, cookery. Some were gentle, others exploitative. But the basic premise was always the same. Take ordinary people and make them live through some kind of drama that other people could watch and, wherever possible, vote for the winners. We were far too busy being amused to notice that reality TV was a Trojan horse for a new kind of deal between us and the screen. A deal we now live with every day.
I'm Mark Andreevich. I'm a professor of media studies, and I write about the cultural, political, and social impact of digital media, where it intersects with popular culture and surveillance.
Mark is telling Jamie about the first time he watched American Big Brother, which aired at the same time as the British series.
They had the host of the show go through the house and point out where all the cameras were. But if you'd been thinking with the lens of old Big Brother, you would have been quite appalled. There were cameras in every room, and she'd go to the bedstead and say, there are even microphones on the bed. And she described it as a kind of very fun, enthusiastic game show host. And I remember thinking, wow, that's a very dystopian and an alarming version of total surveillance, but it's being framed here as fun. And what really interested me about that moment is that it equated willing submission to being monitored all the time with a form of self-expression, and interestingly, with the proof of one's honesty and straightforwardness. So there was a ready equation of reluctance to be tracked all the time with, oh, you must have something you want to hide.
The name Big Brother comes, of course, from George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984, about the way constant surveillance crushes human freedom. But the thing Orwell warned us about was being reframed. Big Brother was becoming entertainment. Instead of fearing surveillance, people started becoming desperate to be watched.
Mark's telling Jamie about the 2001 reality show Temptation Island, which got couples to live on an island with attractive singletons to test their love for each other.
This show didn't pay any of the contestants. Even the bar was a cash bar. They had to buy their own drinks. The idea that you would go on these shows for free and provide the content for these shows precisely because it would help you learn about yourself. It was, I thought, a really interesting angle on the surveillance economy. It's not just a form of self-expression, but it's a form of self-knowledge,
Yeah, they always talk about that at the end, don't they? How much they've learned about themselves and come out a better person.
Exactly. They get kicked off the show, they didn't win the prize, and they're in that final interview, and they're very rarely bitter. That idea that subjecting oneself to the rigor of total surveillance is a kind of learning experience is baked into that format.
For a whole generation of people, especially younger people, Reality TV took a strange idea, share your life with strangers if you want to be successful and want to be your best self, and made it seem completely normal. And for viewers in the early noughties, your best self often meant the middle-class idea that people, and especially working-class people, should strive to improve themselves so they could thrive in this new meritocratic society, becoming more productive, more future-orientated, always on a journey, always growing. And Big Brother was here to celebrate all of this, not to spy on you. Well, that's what Big Brother wanted you to think.
And I remember thinking, reality TV, that's the moment where interactivity gets commodified, where the promise of participation gets harnessed to the imperatives of commerce in ways that allow the producers to exploit the value of, willing participation of members of the audience and use it to make relatively inexpensive, easy to make content.
Jamie's looking baffled by this Marxist analysis of reality TV, so Mark tries again.
How do you deal with this media environment where you need to crank out lots of content? Oh, well, you can enlist the consumers. You can make them part of the show. You can make their willing submission to being watched all the time a form of participation that could then be harnessed and commodified and sold to viewers as reality.
Think about what an incredible business model this is. Reality TV asks us to express ourselves on screen and then gets us to pay to phone up and choose the winner. And better still, sell the winner's new song or book or TV deal back to us once the series is over.
So a show like Idol or Popstar, that's just a season-long advertisement for the final product, which is going to be the songs and the celebrities that are generated by these shows. But it's also a form of market testing, right? So it allows you to put out all of these different choices and say to the audience, okay, which do you pick? And then when they get to pick, they're kind of obligated to follow through. This is our celebrity. We want it. So now let's consume it.
By enlisting us as free workers, we viewers were part of the show. Millions of us were suddenly deciding what happened on TV every week. We had a stake. I voted for Gareth Gates in 2002's Pop Idol final, and I'm pretty sure I voted for Katie Price to go into the Snakes Lake in I'm a Celebrity 2004. I really don't know why I did that. I just remember it felt good to vote for something and immediately see it happen. Maybe I like the contrast to politics, where voting was once every few years in a cold room with a pencil and paper, and where you never got your own way anyway. This felt like how democracy was supposed to work. Pick up the phone, vote, done. Before Big Brother, we all used to scream at our televisions, but the television never listened. Now it was starting to communicate our opinions back to us. For the first time, we had the right, maybe even the duty, to be judge, jury and executioner of our TV stars. But something occurred on Big Brother in 2002 which surprised the show's producers. It was a dark sign of what can happen when you empower the audience to judge from behind a screen.
Were you worried that you might not be loved? Yeah, I was, because I was a bit of a bitch in there, but what I'm saying is, you say your side.
Jade Goody, a 20-year-old dental nurse from Essex, was, it's fair to say, mouthy and loud. In one episode, she got drunk and took her clothes off. Not that any of us cared at the time, but Jade had big disadvantages in life. Her upbringing was tough. At the start of the show, the press and the public were vicious and cruel about her intelligence, her weight, her apparently crass behaviour. Jade is one of the most hated women on British TV, and life will be hard for her when she leaves the house, wrote The Sun at the time. But don't feel sorry for her. Exercise your democratic right and vote the pig out. Members of the public held banners outside the Big Brother house which said, "Jade go to hell," and, can't even really believe this now, "Slaughter the pig." Some people even wrote those insults on tennis balls and threw them over the Big Brother walls so Jade could see them herself.
Oh, horrible.
But,
Was it?
So you must have been really frightened.
I was, because I heard horrible things, but all I heard about myself was J.J. Minger. Hello!
Gary Carter, the man who sold the rights to Big Brother all over the world, a man who believes passionately in the democratising power of reality TV, was watching it happen along with the rest of us.
There was a sense of, how can I say, guiltless criticism and guiltless attack because you were anonymous in the face of somebody who was known. Certainly people started to understand that they could both present certain images of their life, they could also attack certain images of other people's life, that they could, as it were, vote them out.
Gary, was there something structural about the format of reality television that made people feel like they could criticise contestants like Jade Goody in a kind of different way?
When we were casting the first series, we had a kind of template of the kinds of people we were looking for, right? So we wanted a male-female love interest, we wanted a villain, so there you want to think about Nasty Nick, for example. And we wanted what we called a sacrificial lamb. Here is somebody so annoying that I'm going to pick up my phone and get rid of them, and then, hey, I discover that I can get rid of them because they've gone. Therefore, I have enormous power to affect, for the first time, what's happening on the screen of my television. I'm pretty convinced that the willingness to attack and bully contestants derives from this sense that I know them, that I put them there, that I made them, that I just can destroy them, and that we're in on this game together, right? And if you go onto the show, then you're fair game, so don't be naive. Don't tell me you didn't think I wasn't going to say you were fat.
In some ways, Jade was the first victim of internet trolls years before social media. By the mid-2000s, Big Brother and the reality shows that followed it had made it seem completely normal to share your life with strangers. In exchange for letting us capture your every move and monitor your behaviour, you will now have the opportunity to broadcast yourself, to become the real you by letting other people watch. Sometimes you might get attacked, but that was just a price you'd have to pay for the exposure. That strange idea might have quietly withered away, except that a group of 20-somethings in Silicon Valley were building what would become social media, which copied the same format and offered every single one of us the exact same deal as those early reality TV stars. And when YouTube, Facebook and Twitter all arrived between 2004 and 2006, nobody batted an eyelid about sharing their entire life online in exchange for having their data captured. Reality TV had pioneered the dominant business model for these emerging tech platforms, and now it was about to pioneer a strange new idea, that the difference between fiction and reality wasn't nearly as important as we all thought.
Watching Us was written and presented by Jamie Bartlett and written and produced by Gemma Newby. This is BBC Radio 4. Now, a beguiling new tale from the acclaimed storyteller Xanthi Gresham-Knight, which finds the god Apollo in changed circumstances in contemporary Britain. Love, loss and making amends are on his mind.
Cassandra, written and performed by Xanthi Gresham-Knight.
I've still got my bowl, but who will make it sing? It's a rust bucket, but every gardener needs somewhere to put their seeds, and once it was lined with silver and plated with gold. Same thing happened to me as to this bowl. 3,000 years it's taken for Apollo to shed his shine, and in that time I've walked the world. From Ilium to Ilford, Carthage to Canning Town, from Syracuse to Stratford, Apollo's been around. Hey, you, twitching your lip and hugging your posh coffee. don't pretend you're in a hurry. I see you, Twitchlip. You've lost what's worth hurrying for. How do I know? I know. I was once Apollo, god of prophecy. Want to hear my story? Lift us out of traffic roar and siren wail with a tale all for you, but all about me and my love, Cassandra. I take this garden fork, I wind it round this bowl of tin. Let it begin. Let's hear my love, Cassandra, sing.
Our golden palace shimmers in the heat. A smell of rose, burning black olive stones. Around the palace wide streets, around the streets the walls of Troy. Heavy blocks of stone and clay, and beyond the walls a hill, and on the hill the temple of Apollo. I'm his priestess. Every morning I imagine him riding his chariot of the sun, and all day I tend his garden, from root to shoot, bud to fruit. These plants are like my children. Apollo's their father. Every evening I imagine him riding that chariot down into the sea, and at night my dreams are full of his light. Cassandra's love. It called forth so much love in me, only she could cure it. I strapped on the sandals of the sun, Twitchlip, and went to Troy to find her. She was kneeling in mud, always nurturing, root to shoot, bud to fruit. I bought payment for the cure. This bowl. Back then, Twitchlip, it was lined with silver and plated with gold. Pour your coffee in. Let's make a libation to love, yours and mine. I'm shaking poppy seeds when my body fills with light. I sit up. Apollo? He bows, gives me this bowl, lined with silver, plated with gold. I fill it with water. With one hand I touch his hip, and with the other I pour. Water trickles through his golden curls, down my black tresses. It flows down the muscles of his golden body like rain down the veins of a leaf. Apollo puts his hand on my back. I press close, greedy for the light inside him. The golden bowl sounds as it hits the soft ground. Nothing prepared me for Cassandra. As she opened to me, so I to her. When her hands ran over my body, all the light inside me rushed towards her, longing for the touch of earth. But I forgot. I was God, she was human. We went too far. When we came to, the evening shadows hid the laurel trees. I was aware of a pulse in my neck, hot and cold running through my body. As a god, I was used to feeling the turning of the planets, but these small, human sensations were new. Now I could smell every herb in Cassandra's garden. I flicked this bowl and laughed. What a wonder. That small tin brings me to myself. All I ever wanted warms my back.